Doing something for the first time is wild. And when you think of the outdoors, it's inherently wild. I think most importantly for me, it's sharing an activity, sharing what I love with people that have not experienced that or have some kind of barrier related to it. The magic of being able to create that bond, that connection with an activity, a person, a place, that's special.
Hot mic. Yeah, it's hot. It's definitely hot. What's up, everyone? Welcome in. Man, I'm excited to see everyone. This is great. So many smiling faces just looking at me and Derek and Elisa. So this is exactly what we were looking for. We want to welcome you into the Sincerely Yours Outdoors live show. We are here at Patagonia, Pittsburgh. Excited to spend this time with a friend. Just like any other episode. So how are we feeling, Elisa?
Good.
Yeah.
A little nervous with the people, but
everyone's smiling, right? Yeah. You've been on the road a little bit, back in Pittsburgh, getting well acclimated to the Pittsburgh weather. It's been kind of odd when you left. It wasn't, sunny and 75.
No.
We weren't expecting this autumn season to be this way either. So what are you kind of vibing to as you're coming back to Pittsburgh? What music, potential books that you're reading, audio that you're consuming, that you're kind of getting grounded in?
I've been listening to a lot of music in Spanish. I think every single time. So I got back from Colombia a month ago. I keep saying a week ago. I thought time's going fast. And every single time I come back I've been to Colombia twice now, and every single time I come back, I always feel this culture shock, and I'm always missing Colombia, and I'm just missing speaking Spanish. I miss being in this country where I'm able to connect to like my Latina identity. And so I think when I come back, I'm just really grounded in this music in Spanish. So one artist, her name's Lei. She's from Colombia, and been loving it. So
that's
yeah.
awesome. I love that. Derek, what you been vibing to?
Consuming as of recent. Still reading quite a bit. So still in Obstacles Away. So those of you that have been tapping in for the last episode, still in that. Listening to a lot of eclectic music throughout as well at this point in time. Try not to timestamp as to what's out right now. But throughout, a lot of jazz, a lot of indie music, still the same as usual. A lot of the same plays, Frank. A lot of the teams there. So that's more largely with me. What about you?
No. Kate Renata. That's literally it. That's been my vibe.
Audible sounds from the crowd. Love that.
So it's been quite the vibe for me. Just been hanging out, relaxing, getting ready for travel. So I feel like it's an artist I can put on anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
Catch a vibe. So that's been good for me. Been reading, watching a lot of films. The Alpinist. I know someone on the front row put me on to that. So thanks for that. Been watching that. And just been kind of getting inspired for our conversation. So I'm really looking forward to this. I want you to introduce yourself again. I know this is our second go-round, but I'm interested to see what identity has changed since we last spoke. I know that was about a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Going on?
No, I think
It was earlier
in
this year.
February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier this year. Yeah, I certainly still want to hear kind of like the phases of evolution and how you want to introduce yourself in this capacity.
Okay. I'm Elisa Varlotta. I'm from Pittsburgh. And the past few months have been a wild journey for sure. I've learned a lot. And I'm excited to be back and to start some more work within diversifying the outdoors, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I'm happy to share this space with you. I know in the first episode, I wasn't even climbing at that point, so you were like teaching me a lot on the fly. So I want, I want us to kind of set a groundwork, especially for the listenership, around some of the terminology that may be used as we move forward with the episode. So maybe you can help us do that. So starting from the top, I mean, Red Point would be one?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different terminology within climbing. And yeah, it's funny actually that you mentioned that when we first did the episode, Marcus wasn't climbing. I remember that day we were at Ascend and Marcus didn't climb. We were like, okay, one day. And now pro climber over here.
Didn't.
Sure enough.
As I sit with a pro climber, that's funny to hear.
But okay, yeah. So I guess we can start with, there are different forms of climbing. And you have bouldering, you have traditional climbing, sport climbing, alpinism, mountaineering. There are many different types. But for tonight's purpose, I guess we're not going to go into all of it. But you have traditional climbing, which was kind of like the beginning of it all. And you have pieces of gear that go into the rock. So the rock was blank, and people started placing gear, and they would climb up, and the gear is what protects them when they would fall. And then over time, climbing has evolved. Different ideas of climbing have changed, and there's also sport climbing now. Sport climbing is different because you don't have the gear that goes into the rock. You have bolts that are already placed on the rock by people, and then you place your quick draws as you go up. So you place equipment, but it's different than traditional climbing. And then if the first person who goes up and is placing the gear, that's called leading, if the rope isn't at the top. And then it gets very nuanced if you do a climb for the first time, and then there's another, that's called on-sighting. If you're trying it, you have no information of the climb and you're going up first. Then once you already do the climb, and you have information, you have the knowledge of what you're getting yourself into, if you do the climb, then that's called a red point. There's lots of different terms, but those are some that we can start off with.
I do want to start off with first ascent as well.
First ascent is the first person who has done the climb. So no one ever has done the climb. The first person who does it clean without falling, it's the first ascent.
Are we looking at someone that may have done
We
a
got a
first
lot of good
ascent?
here.
Like,
I just
don't
couldn't
know.
help but smile there. Yeah. It's a good play.
A
Well,
few.
a little
right?
bit.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay.
Very
keep
good
it
play.
going. Yeah,
Very good
yeah.
play. Yeah, I think next is crux, if we could jump into that.
Crux. So the way climbing works, there are grades for climbs, and every single climb, there's usually a distinct crux, which is the hardest part of a climb. So it's a section where it's definitely like the hardest moves that you have to make. And usually based off of that crux, it gives you the grade of the climb.
Yeah. Those are very prevalent. I've experienced a lot, and I've been guided by you, so thank you for that. I do want us to kind of dive directly into your travel and how that's been. You're coming back from Colombia. You've learned a lot. You've experienced a lot, climbed in different spaces. What has that experience been to you, and what are you trying to share in this space at the moment?
Yeah. So I was in Colombia for 6 months before we did the first episode. Or when we did the first episode, we talked about the film. That's the main reason why I went there. And I thought I was only going to be there for 2 months, but Colombia just keeps pulling me in. And I was there for 6 months. And definitely has impacted me and has had a huge influence in who I am right now. So very grateful for those months in Colombia.
Tell us about some routes that you climbed. I always try to nudge you because I think from my perspective, I look up to you as a professional climber, but you never call yourself a professional climber. And seeing some of the routes that you've done indoors and outdoors at this moment, I'm always curious to know why you don't step into that space. So tell us what you were climbing while you're in Colombia, maybe some grading, and we can actually dive into what the grading system may be.
Yeah, so when I was in Colombia, I was doing a lot of sport climbing. So when I talk about the climbs, that'll be just a reference point is sport climbing. But the way that the grades work, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, once you need a rope, you start with 5 point something. So you have like 5-0, 5-1, 5-2, 5-3, 5-4. And for a really long time, 5.9 was the hardest climb. And then once climbing started changing, sport climbing came around, grades started evolving, and people started pushing the grades. And so now the hardest grade that we have is 5.15D. And the way that it works, so once you hit 510 to a 511, you have an A, a B, a C, and a D. So you have like 510A, 510B, 10C, 10D, and then it keeps repeating. So that's kind of how the grades work. And yeah, in Colombia, I was there, I guess it was 2 years ago, and I was climbing a bunch. And then came back this year with some projects that I wanted to work on and trying to push myself. So
he's trying to draw you into telling grades.
Which were?
I guess, so the first year I was there, I guess to give you some reference to it all, whenever I started climbing when I was little, like I mentioned in the first podcast.
Spin back, by the way. Go view that podcast. Yeah.
And leading, like I mentioned, the first person who goes up, when you're putting the gear in, if you fall above the last piece that you placed, you fall that distance +2. And so the fall factor is a lot, there's more of a fall factor in leading than if you have the rope already set and you're climbing up. So I had always been very nervous to fall, very, very tentative, and I would practically come down off of every climb because I was so scared to push myself. And Colombia was the first time where everything changed. So this was 2 years ago. And I don't know, when you're in the climbing world, sometimes grades get into people's head and there are grades that people want to reach. And so for me, I always was like, well, if I could do a 5:13 one day, like I will be really happy and feel accomplished for myself. And the first year I was able to do a 13A. And so when I came back the second year, I was like, okay, let's see what I can do, how I can push myself. And so I worked on various projects, and the hardest one that I was able to do was a 13C, which is the hardest thing I've ever climbed. And I'm excited to keep pushing myself and see what can happen. So, yeah.
Nah, you can get that off. Go ahead.
Nice.
I love that. And the reason why I press you so much to say some of these things, I know in the sport of climbing, with me kind of coming into it for less than a year now, is the faces that I am searching for the most are normally not out there touting their skill. And I think from my perspective, there's so many superheroes that I look to in other spaces that have been on this podcast that want to go out and say like, hey, I've done this in an effort to welcome you outside and give you fuel to say like, hey, I can climb a 5:13 as well. So that's why I press you a lot for those things, just to ask what's your perspective on those things. Because when I saw, you didn't even post that video, which is the funny part. I saw you climb that 5:13 and I was like, oh, this is great, because I've climbed with you before and I know your skill, but it's like knowing the difficulty that surrounds that climb. It was almost emotional for me to see you climb that, because I felt as if the time that we spent together, that we're almost living vicariously through each other. So it was really awesome to see you in Colombia get that climb in. So hopefully your perspective could potentially be centered or changed around that as well. So what do you think about that? That's a lot, I know.
When you say perspective, like, or what exactly do you mean?
That social media could be a tool to welcome people like us outside and know that we could be professional climbers, generalists, but we have a space and we're welcome to be out there.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but social media has always been hard for me. And I think it goes back to, I mean, even in my personal interactions, I think I'm very reserved. I don't voluntarily give information. If you don't ask
Really?
me a question, I'm not going to answer.
I mean, we just saw it, you know. Oh, what are you climbing? Yeah.
And so I think that translates over into social media. And yeah, I guess it's hard for me to put myself out there and put what I'm doing out into the world. But at the same time, it's an inner conflict because I do realize social media nowadays, especially for athletes, especially within the outdoor industry, everything is navigated through social media. And I see that it can be a good tool, but I can't bring myself to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a balance. It's a balancing act. I think we've both been in that space of like, how much do we want to share? And I can say for everyone that has followed us on social media this week, you can clearly see that we put something out every day. And I was like, oh, do we want to put something out every day or not? I don't really know, but we tried it. So we're learning a lot around how we step into and kind of fill space just from a representation standpoint. So we're right there with you.
How did that feel, putting it out there?
Go ahead.
Maybe we have differing opinions. No, I mean, I think it was really excellent to see the ways in which community rallied around, our testing. I mean, I think we've really built a community throughout SYO that's experimental, but there has been underlying just this community of trust. I think we are approaching the show, the byproducts of everything, very altruistically, so that if for some point in time we were to make a mistake by any means, it wouldn't be like perceived as us being intentional upon doing so. So we've really been like intentional, strategic with the ways in which we amplify what we do, so that we can curate and cultivate opportunities for others to see themselves in it. Oftentimes on the assets, you're not seeing Marcus and I throughout SYO stuff, where you're seeing like people that we're hoping to amplify and to build community so that others that look like you, that experience things such as you do, like see themselves in you. I mean, Marcus and I have a respective community ourselves that look like us, that experience the same things as we do, that live in our neighborhood, that listen to our music, that do all of that kind of thing. But what we are trying to cultivate with this show is to amplify that, to bring in people that don't look like us, to experience things of that nature. So it's been a learning experience, I think, throughout. We've really been like, prior to this, posting on our own accord and on our own cadence. And we have been extremely in control to control narratives and things of that nature. But I feel like this week was a really great learning opportunity for us to like know that there's trust there. That we don't have to control all of the narratives, because the real power in doing, though, is to create connection points for others to tell their story or their side, so that it doesn't have to be like, Marcus and I post this on Monday at 12:05. That we can like encourage others to do so, to amplify that as well. So I hope that gives context to your question. And perhaps you have a different perspective.
I would say from two different veins. So from the podcast slant, it has been a little overwhelming for us, or at least for me, speaking from my vantage point, being critical of like the content we put out. I'm always aware of, is the objective that we're pushing still reaching its mark? So sending out content every day for a week was definitely like, oh, I'm in my head. Is this actually meeting our mark? I feel like it did. I mean, from the reception of the people here, I feel like we accomplished that. So I would say from the podcast slant, that's my perspective. From my own personal slant, I can say from episode 20 and people hearing about my most recent travel, I think I'm on the right path.
Oh, yeah.
People reached out to me directly saying like, oh, I heard about your trip to California or your trip to Colorado. Like, tell me more. Which I think from my perspective, they look like me. They're diverse individuals, and I felt like I was doing the right thing. So every reel that I posted, and still to come, that I haven't put out, people have directly reached out to me and have said, oh, well, where'd you camp at? Or like, what was your favorite activity? And I feel like through that, I've inspired someone to do the same thing that I know through my experience was a safe space, challenged me personally, but also challenged my perspective of recreation. Because I went from East Coast to the furthest most point, West Coast, which was extremely special and humbling for me. But being able to translate that and show that authentically on my social platform is something that tells me I'm doing the right thing. So I'm sure you've had those experiences as well. You just haven't considered showing them quite yet, which is respectable. You know, everyone has a different opinion on that. So
yeah, I mean, your social account
bussin'.
It was like night and day.
That was a joke. I mean, it's cool if you.
It wasn't funny. That's why no one laughed.
Okay, tough crowd to me.
Just for like night and day, your personal channel, to see how that's amplified more largely, because I think it's been aligning with your why. Mm-hmm. It's like, why am I using this platform, and what can I do to convey that message, to amplify and to inspire others. So I think largely it's just like finding that for you. I mean, from my personal channel, my objective is to give content that inspires people to run, period. The ways in which I structure that is really intentional. It's music that I'm listening to. It's routes that I'm running. It's things that I should have known or that I should have shared with people prior based upon my experience. I've been running for a very long time. Year one of running was just like brutal because I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have access to information or people that would say like, here, maybe you shouldn't run this like 6 mile threshold and then work out after that. Maybe you should just relax. Really into like simple things like that. That's really allowed me to create community and to amplify that so that when I do run, I perhaps see not just people that look like me, but people that are like healthy and that are safe and using like intentionality around what they're doing as well. So it's really just finding that avenue. I think you'll find it, especially as you are now stewarding all that you're doing here as well.
For sure. You had referenced that, 2 years ago when you went to Colombia to now, your climbing style or intention has been a little bit different. Can you quickly reference what you mean by that?
Yeah, thanks for spinning back to that because I definitely want to get into that too, yeah.
I mean, I have some specific questions, but I'll let you see if you accomplished the goal here before I circle back.
Yeah, I think within the past 2 years, I'm curious to see where I can take my climbing and how far I can push myself. I love the feeling of trying at my hardest, and I want to see where I can take it. So I realized for me to be able to see where I can go, I had to really push myself out of my comfort zone. And so in climbing, for me, for sport climbing, what that meant was willing to take falls, whereas a few years ago, I was scared to do that because I realized if I wasn't going to fall, I was never going to advance. And so I started projecting a lot more. And projecting is whenever there's a route, and usually the first time you try it, it feels so hard. Like you might not be able to do all of the moves, and you come down and you're just like, I could never do this. And over sessions, you work individual moves, and you might be happy if you like almost touched a hold, which is, if someone who doesn't climb, that might sound really funny. Like you didn't touch the hold, like, why are you happy? But it's those small progressions that you get excited about, and it motivates you to keep coming back. And so that's kind of where I've been right now, is pushing myself through projecting hard routes, and you learn so much through that process. And when you get it, it's awesome. If you don't get it, sometimes it's a little bit hard, but the process it's a good journey.
Was there like a pivotal or critical moment, like you can clearly articulate 2 years ago was like the point in time where I shifted my approach? Like, why? You mentioned like wanting to climb and to press and challenge yourself there, but in layman's term, why couldn't you do that here? Or why couldn't you do that? Like, was there something around that that centered you to shift that approach?
Yeah, definitely. So when I went to Colombia, it was the first time where I was at a crag and everyone was speaking Spanish, and it was this, population where I just felt connected to. and I felt at home. Whereas here, I had never felt that sense of like being at home. And I think that sense of community really showed, that's where I saw specifically that if you don't have community, if you don't have that support, people can never fully grow. Mm-hmm. And I realized that with that community, I grew as a climber, but I also connected more to my identity. I connected more to who I was, and everything just like grew at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, Colombia, I'm grateful for everything it's given me, and it has inspired me now to come back here and create more of the community that I would like to see in the climbing community, and create more diversity within the climbing community here in Pittsburgh, but also like within the US, and then also expand it on a global scale and use climbing as this means of social change, uniting people from different countries, from different cultures, because we're all connected with climbing. But especially within the climbing industry, I noticed through the film in the US, it's very, you only hear stories of US climbers or European climbers. And so my whole mission this past year has been amplifying voices the stories we haven't heard. And I think that will always be one of my biggest missions, is like uniting cultures, people from you don't normally see in the climbing community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We're already on the film segment, so can you tell us a little bit about the stories that people can expect to see and hear from on the film, and just give a quick little overview of the global scale that you're going to make an impact on? What's the outcomes that you're looking to have?
Yeah, so the film Guerreras, we have 6 different stories, and they're all intertwined into one movie. And we specifically chose the women in the film to kind of fit different aspects of womanhood, but also fit different aspects of climbing. So that's one way that we hope to reach people from, all over. We have people who are bouldering, we have people who are mountaineering, we have people trad climbing, sport climbing. And then it goes into this idea of identity as well. So we have a mother, we have a woman who lives, so she lives outside of this place. It's called Tacuello in Colombia. And she lives on indigenous land. She's an indigenous woman. And she comes together with a woman who is trying to become the first Colombian woman to get her mountaineering guide cert. And there are just so many different, I could go on like all the different aspects, but we really tried to choose women who all the stories were different, mm-hmm. and could hopefully connect with people wherever they were.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. As we're like into the film here, and you shared a little bit of this in the first episode that we had with you. I'm interested to hear how your answer may have changed given your experience. What have you like learned throughout this as well? I know you had like from the first episode intentional like things that you were seeking in terms of not just about yourself, but about community, but also about culture and identity. We highlighted those a lot within that first episode. On those same paths, what did you learn throughout this process? Not just from your individual experience, but now like as a quasi director behind the scenes managing this project as well. Feel free to share as you deem best fit.
I don't want to take up too much time, but there's so many things
I learned.
We got time.
I guess we can start first off with the filmmaking world side of that. It's crazy because before this film, if I would watch a 3-minute video or a movie, I would never think about the work that went behind it. And I feel like many people watch something, they watch it once, and then it's done. And they don't think about the hours or the years that went into that product. And I think I'm so grateful for the team that I worked with, because I don't have experience behind the camera, so I couldn't film it. So I found a production company, Gone Rogue Productions, who filmed it and who are editing it right now. And being a part of the filming the whole month of March, I learned so much of the planning, the intentionality behind film production, and then I was able to be in the editing process. And as well, all of the work that goes into getting your final product is wild. But yeah, that whole film side, I learned so much. And also, I think personally, what I learned from the project was I realized that the project was almost a catharsis for me. And I think, so when I was little, I was very shy to the point where I couldn't talk. And I remember my parents sat me down and they're like, you need to talk. And they said, we are going to give you a journal and you need to write down every single time there's a situation where you feel uncomfortable, or just like write down these situations. And I read the journal a while ago and I couldn't say bye to the bus driver. I couldn't ask the librarian for a book. And so this verbal expression has always been something that I've struggled with. And I think for me, it's like finding my own voice and finding my worth in my voice has been something that it has been hard for me. And so throughout this movie, there were many situations where I realized, I was like, I have to do this for myself, but also the community that I'm trying to tell this story about. And yeah, it has impacted me a ton.
That's huge. Thanks for being a trailblazer within that capacity as well. It's much easier to suppress and just say, like, I don't want to tell the bus driver goodbye. Things of that nature, amplifying that within the work that you're doing with the film is like huge. I'm sure there's been many people that were like, I can't say this, or it could be just that they don't feel comfortable with doing that, and that further builds into stories not being shared and being amplified. I mean, this is by no way easy for us, to have conversations within this. It's all intentional, but it's a value. So I can't wait, to see the film, and I can't wait for you to continue to amplify your voice throughout the channels that you can before passing it over to you.
Yeah. You have learned so much through this experience, and I feel like this film is going to make such an impact globally. But let's shift and think of what's going to occur here locally. You've learned so much on the road in Colombia. What are you bringing back here that you're excited to implement and share? Yeah,
so I guess we can get into some local projects that are happening. So we have different local climbing organizations, and SWAPAC is one of them, Southwestern Pennsylvania Climbers Coalition. And SWAPAC their main goal is they're responsible for development of climbing areas within Southwest PA. And there's another group as well called Climb Pittsburgh, and these two organizations right now have been working very hard on creating access to climbing areas within Pittsburgh. And it's within like the city of Pittsburgh. And these are areas where people can climb for free outside. And Climb Pittsburgh, SWAPAC, they've had huge success. They've talked with the mayor, they've talked with local administration, city council, and working to really get Pittsburgh to recognize climbing as a recreational activity. And I think, so a lot of times in cities, people climb indoors, right? Mm-hmm. But when you go outside, there's it's a whole other world. And many people, it's hard to get into these spaces. And now with these local areas that are free, what it will do for the community is endless, and there are many possibilities of bringing in people, new climbers, anyone into these areas to experience climbing, and you don't have to travel far to do so. And so I think that I'm excited because what's next for me, I'm actually going to be working with Marcus, and I'm super excited at Outdoor Inclusion. And I think that we can really make a change in the climbing community in Pittsburgh. And that's the most meaningful thing that we can do.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited.
Clearly I'm excited. If there's one person excited in this room, it's definitely going to be me. I think from my experience and even referencing back to episode 20, like Frank Kyoto was so eye-opening to me, being able to see it as a proximal space that I can identify with. It's, 10 to 15 minutes from me, but also seeing us climb there was amazing. And I think that's what kind of spurred so many moments for me of, oh, this is real. Like our community can really access these things. No price point. We just need someone that's going to lead and be able to say like, hey, we're here doing this. We're climbing here. If you want to get here, we're going to make sure that happens. So here you are.
Here we go.
You're the champion for that. So I can't wait to see the diversity of individuals that are going to be at Frank Kyoto very soon. And it seems like the work is pretty close to being done in terms of development. So I'm looking forward to that.
So I heard.
Heard it through the grapevine earlier today. So, yeah.
No,
There's
that's awesome.
a lot of work being done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good. Coming soon. No, that's great.
Yeah.
But I do want to spin back here because I'm like super excited for this, within the work here and the collaboration. But I was listening recently to another show, and they were talking about how an opportunity isn't really that if it's not in reach. And I am excited for like the things that you all are doing. And I think like Elisa, especially for you, are there like elements and things that you learned in Colombia that you hope to draw back and bring here? I know like access and having like the physical infrastructure in place. So shout out to SWAPAC and the team there is one conversation. But even you've already alluded to as well, the necessity for community and seeing individuals that look like us and things of that nature there. Are there things tangibly that you learned there that can actually create opportunity? That we have the infrastructure. It's like, here, it's in reach. Now, like, come along with me. Like, is there anything that you learned there that you can apply here in southwestern Pennsylvania?
That's a really good question.
I hope to bring good questions to this conversation.
I think one thing that I learned I don't know if this is going to answer your question exactly, but throughout the film, before I think I mentioned this in the last podcast as well. Before I started working on the film, I knew nothing about filmmaking, and I really set my mind on it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to learn everything I need to make this happen, and I really went after it. And I think after this experience, I have seen that if you have people putting in all of your energy, all of like your heart and passion into a project, that it'll happen. And I think you always hear people say that, but I guess I never really like saw it until this past year. And I think I'm just excited to bring that same energy into Pittsburgh and really go after the vision, the mission that we want to accomplish. I don't know. I guess I didn't have like a tangible answer, but that's kind of like the big picture.
Yeah, experience is a leading indicator for growth. So I can't wait to see, especially now that you're, articulating and verbalizing like, this is it. This is the next thing as it relates to building community here. I feel confident in saying that it's going to happen, So it's in the hands of two great stakeholders. And I mean, even like throughout the region here, the stakeholders and the engagement to this point has been excellent. So super excited to see and like to earmark this, this date in which you articulated that to spin back to it and to see all the things that would come as a result. So kudos.
Yeah. We're speaking it into existence. So we'll look back a year, 2 years from now and say, it happened. The film, this is one down. Is there a future of a series, multiple films, or you think this is all the love and passion that you're putting into the world? No more film. What are you thinking?
I don't know. It has been a ton of work, and I think everyone on the team has, like I said, put everything into the project. When we were in Colombia, we were living and working together. We were fully immersed in the project. And yeah, I think if I were to do another project like this or a film, I would also want to learn how to be behind the camera. I also realized that whoever is behind the camera has a lot of influence on the storytelling and how the other person on the other side feels. And so I think this also goes into this idea of representation. And I just realized the power of storytelling, but also, I don't know, I began to value what stories are being told, who we're telling the stories. And I think for me, filming is always going to be important to me. And now it'll have like a special place. And I would love to create some sort of mentorship program in Pittsburgh or create like a BIPOC film festival and bring filming into Pittsburgh in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
But
you referenced a few different things that I want us to like kind of tie all together. Your film is different than others that are in the marketplace, obviously because of the representation piece, multiple women telling their stories on a platform. And I'm sure that they all have different journeys in regard to what's their celebratory moment. Can you speak directly to that? Like, what are the key differences? Because when you look at, like The Alpinist, for example, and other films that are in the space, it's an individual journey, and it's normally doing something extremely difficult in the journey to reach the summit or whatever is their climax. I'm sure it's going to be different in this because maybe it's not really the climb or the objective of getting that 14D. Maybe it's the camaraderie, the celebration with women that look like you. That's the journey. So what's the key difference that you can share in this moment?
Yeah. So most climbing films are, feature U.S. climbers, European climbers. Mm-hmm. And if climbers are going to other countries, a lot of times it's that same population going into these countries. And so for me, what I really wanted to do was tell the stories of the local communities. So for this film, it was Colombia. And like you said, all of these stories that we chose are all intertwined, and we're using identity and climbing and how those two intersect and how these women have found empowerment through climbing. And it was really interesting also because I think whenever I was doing this project, I did receive some pushback from the US, and people kept telling me this might be a hard project because it's not in the US. And that just also showed me the need to tell stories that are not just about people in the US and expanding the stories, the narratives that we're telling about climbing. And also, like you said, climbing you don't have to just think about a grade or reaching like the top of a mountain. It's the whole process behind it, but it's also, if you can really understand who the climber is, I think that also gives it a lot more power. And yeah, it's the hope to combine identity, climbing, and just everything together.
And I think that's really thoughtful, the approach in that we all like interpret things in different capacities, and taking that into consideration, I think really brings home the narrative of like inspiring others throughout that. With the film, this is like part of your legacy, you know, which is like wild to think at this stage of your young adult life. What do you hope to leave with this film, and as it is launching and the approaching, so to speak? What legacy do you hope to leave with that? Knowing that it isn't the end, you know, it's like there's something else to come, you know, as well. Like you're gonna launch it, people are gonna receive it, and then you continue to live, you know. So it's like there's more that you're going to achieve and to contribute. But to keep this like capsule, this time period, what do you hope to leave with it?
For me, the most important part of the movie was uniting communities and having voices be heard. And it was pretty perfect because with the film, there are 6 different stories, but all of us came together around a talking circle. That's what we call it. Like, it was a fire, and in the film we're all together. And so it really came full circle that, you know, all of these different women were telling their stories, but we also were able to unite together. And I think that's exactly the whole point of the film, is uniting communities, having voices be heard, stories that we haven't seen within the community, amplify those stories. And yeah, that's, I think, the legacy that I hope that the film will have.
I know we're kind of coming towards the end of the episode before we open up potentially to audience questions. But I have really 2 random questions. One that is pretty standard, but I've never heard who your heroes or who like influenced you in this work. I know climbing has been familial in terms of connection, but who externally has influenced you where you said, oh, I want to be like them, or I want to do something in their vein, that potentially has led to this film? So any heroes in this space that you can think of initially?
So initially I was going to say my dad, but just to give him a lot of credit, and then I'll answer the question. But yeah, so my dad, he's the one who taught me how to climb, and his whole vision on climbing is about bringing people together and giving back to the community. Mm-hmm. And so I think that has always been instilled in me because of him. But if we're talking outside of the family, yeah, the reason I started the film was because there's another film called Pretty Strong, and it's a film about 6 different women, and one of the women is from Mexico, and her name's Ferry Rodriguez, and she's a sponsored climber. And seeing her on the screen was the first time that I had seen a Latina woman. The whole film was in Spanish. It was shot in Mexico, and I just felt very emotional. And that was the moment where I said, I'm going to do this film. And actually, like a few months ago, I met her over FaceTime. But nice. It was amazing to be able to talk to her. And yeah, she was the one who kind of gave me the push to tell our stories. So she's up there.
She's up there, right there with Mike Varlotta.
There you go.
I mean, I can't say I'm a byproduct as well of your dad. So if he wouldn't have taken me climbing with you, I wouldn't be interested in climbing. So it's a lot of byproducts, children giving Mike Varlotta high fives and saying thank you. so yeah. What's your next adventure? I think we already know one, but others. What other things are going on that you'd like to share?
Other things? No, yeah, I think I realized also in Colombia that for me, this is kind of diversifying the outdoors is the work that I'm most passionate about. And so I am excited to start thinking ahead of what we can do in Pittsburgh. And for me, finding this meaningful work is really key. And that's the next adventure right now. But I definitely will be taking trips and going back to Colombia. So for a little bit.
There we go. Yeah.
But yeah.
What climbing spot have you had on the radar that you haven't been able to climb it yet? That you're like, oh, I want to do that in the next, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years.
I would love to go to Spain. There's so many places in Spain. Yeah, I think I would say Spain.
Okay. I haven't been, so I can't give you any beta. So, Derek, you got any questions?
I mean, it was just fun to be back. I mean, Patagonia aside, it's fun to be back for part 2 with you. I can't wait to see the film. Can't wait to see for others to see the film as well and to be inspired as well. So I can't wait. But it's good to be back for part 2.
In closing, shout outs. I mean, we're in person. Any shout outs you want to give?
If my team listens to it, the team who has helped me with the whole movie, I'm so grateful to the entire team. And I don't think there could have been another better team. So, yeah. And thank you both for creating this space and having me here. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Happy to be here with you. Any timeline on when the film will come out that we can kind of share right now?
Yeah. So we're in the final editing stage and we're still fundraising. So that's still going on, but it will be done by the end of the year to submit it to different film festivals.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So the hope is that it'll make it to these film festivals. So we'll see what happens.
Nice.
That's awesome.
GoFundMe page will be in the show notes.
My God.
We'll continue to push the initiative across the line as it is approaching here. So we're allies in the space to continue to amplify.
Yeah, I knew someone wouldn't make the plug in terms of GoFundMe. We'll link that into the show notes. I mean, it's on there. So how about you plug your Instagram so we can follow you as you climb? What's that? And the film Instagram page.
Yeah, so the film is Guerreras Film. And then my Instagram is Elisa _Varlotta. Just my name.
Easy enough, right?
Yeah.
Look at the show description.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap. So thanks again, Elisa. It's always great to spend time with you. Thanks for everyone in the crowd, SYO team. Thank you for coming out. And it's a wrap.